What have I made of every championship club so far this season? Today we're going to be throwing every championship club into this tier list, whether they've been way above my expectations, above my expectations, about right, below, or way below my expectations. Now obviously this tier list is a very subjective thing. For example, I'll have had different expectations of Hull City at the start of the season compared to a lot of other people, so feel free to have your say on your club so far. How do you think you're performing based on what you thought you'd achieve at the start of the year? It's also worth pointing out we still are in the early days of this championship season. Only 6 games have been played and plenty can unfold over these next few months that will change my opinion of each of these clubs, but I thought we'd throw them all into a tier list at this stage to sort of gauge where I'm at with each club at the moment. We'll start out with Blackburn Rovers, and it would probably be wrong of me not to put them in way above expectations. Before a ball had been kicked this year, I did have them in the bottom 3, albeit since I made that predictions, they signed quite a few players, obviously. Did lose Smodics like we'd all expected, but to have gone unbeaten in their first 6 matches, I think is really impressive. A lot of the new additions have looked really positive so far as well. Didn't think they looked particularly great when they came to Deepdale over the weekend, I must admit, especially considering they were playing against 10 men for the entire second half. But taking the whole season so far into context, what I thought of Blackburn before a ball had been kicked as well, I think I'd have to put them into the top tier. Where do I stand on Bristol City at the moment? Based on their start to the campaign, I'd probably say it's about right from what I expected of them. It's 2 wins, 2 draws and 2 losses. The 2 back-to-back 3-0 defeats were quite damning, but felt like they maybe got themselves back on track over the weekend with that win against Oxford. For clubs like Bristol City, it's all about trying to break through the glass ceiling of those mid-table finishes which they've become so accustomed to in recent years. I do think they've got the talent to kick on there, but based on this start to the season, it does seem like that inconsistency will still be at play, and it's more than likely going to be another sort of mid-table finish, which is what I was sort of feeling for them before a ball had been kicked. Burnley so far, I'd probably say they're about right from what I expected of them so far this season. 13 points from their first 6 matches isn't too shabby. They're averaging over 2 points per game right now. Sitting 3rd in the table, I had them predicted to finish 2nd at the end of the campaign. I still think they've got a very good chance of achieving that. Scott Parker has had to spin quite a few plates this season with everything going on behind the scenes, how many departures and incomings they've had at that club and things like that. But everything considered so far, I'd probably say they're about right for where I thought they'd be at this stage of the season. Cardiff, going to have to go in way below expectations. Now, there were a few people at the start of the year who were expecting a bit of a drop-off from Errol Bullock's side after quite a few people thought that last season was a bit of an overperformance from them. I still thought they'd be a solid outfit this year, though. I certainly didn't think they'd go their first 6 matches having not won any games, obviously. Bullock's paid the price for that. If you've not seen the video we did on Cardiff over the weekend in a little bit more detail, make sure to go ahead and check that one out. But based on their start to the season, it would be wrong to put them anywhere else than the bottom tier, I think. And you know what? That's also where I'm going to put Coventry as well. It's not been as disastrous as a start to the season for the Bluebirds, but given the expectations on them at the start of the year, I had them predicted to finish in the top 6. Quite a few people had tipped them for the same with the bookies as well. They were quite a popular pick for promotion this year. After what felt like quite a positive transfer window, to have only won 1 of their first 6 matches has been a really underwhelming start. Now listen, we have been here with Coventry before. Even looking back to last year, they started it out really slowly and then eventually clicked into gear. Ben Sheaf not being available has obviously been a big blow for them. That's left a massive hole in midfield, but even with the squad they've got to work with there, they should have picked up more points in their opening 6 matches than they actually have. But the Championship can be brutal, and if you're not on your A game, you're going to be punished for that. Derby so far this season, I've been pleasantly surprised by, I'm going to say, above expectations. Yes, they're yet to pick up a point on the road so far this season, but they've won all 3 of their home matches so far. I had them to survive just about this season. If they can continue performing, especially as they have been at Pride Park, be so solid in their home matches, I see no reason why that shouldn't be the case. And if they can start to pick up the odd result on the road as well, there's no reason why they can't be maybe a little bit more comfortable than that and properly push for a mid-table finish this season. So everything I've seen from Derby so far, I'd say they've been slightly above my expectations. Hull City, I'm going to put below expectations. Maybe there was a case for having them in the bottom tier, but after winning that game over the weekend against Stoke, they have moved up a little bit in my estimations. Listen, I probably did expect it to be a bit of a bumpy ride, especially at the start of the campaign for Hull, after how much turnover there was at that club over the summer. A new manager coming in with a new philosophy, a new group of players. It was always going to be a little bit messy at the start of the season. I think that Hull fans have probably seen that so far. The result against Stoke definitely was a step in the right direction, but whether or not they can discover that consistency, we'll have to wait and see. As I said when they signed him though, Liam Miller I think he's already proven to be a really positive addition for Hull. Luton Town, I'm also going to have him below expectations. I'm not going to have them in the bottom category because they have won back-to-back matches now, and it seems like they're starting to discover that bit of form after beating both Millwall and Sheffield Wednesday in consecutive weeks. Now, Luton obviously were a very popular pick for promotion at the start of the season, justifiably so. The first 4 matches of the campaign really didn't go to plan. I wasn't massively impressed by them when they came to Deepdale earlier in the season, but after riding out what has been a really rocky start to this season, it does feel like they're starting to discover that form now. So they've still been below expectations, but it feels like in these coming weeks they will move up the tiers. You know, this time next month there's every chance they're in the top 6. Middlesbrough, I'm also going to have him below expectations. They've been a really tricky one to put your finger on so far because all the underlying stats back up Middlesbrough as being a really strong side so far this season. Even watching them on the eye, I think performance levels have been pretty decent, but that's just not been reflected in the results they've picked up. It was a very similar story when I watched them over a full 90 minutes against my team, Preston North End. They had an abundance of chances in that game, went 1-0 up, really should have killed off the game, but Preston got back into it and were able to grind out a point in the end. That's been their real Achilles heel so far this season. They're currently mid-table. I expect them to be in the top 6. I still think they've got a very good chance of doing that. They just need to start taking their chances. They're only averaging 1 goal per game right now, and for a side with as much quality as this Middlesbrough team, I think they need to be up in those levels. Millwall, probably between below expectations and about right. I'd probably have them slightly below expectations so far just because of how strong they were under Neil Harris in the back end of last season. The fact they've only won 1 of their first 6 matches this season, they've not really been able to carry that momentum from the previous campaign into this one. Now, in terms of chance creation, getting into a lot of good areas, Millwall have been pretty decent for that so far this season. I'll obviously get to see them in a little bit more detail when Preston play Millwall at the weekend as well, which I'm excited about, but opening 6 matches, probably slightly below expectations on Millwall. Norwich right now, do you know what? After that performance over the weekend, putting 4 goals past Watford, I'd probably have them in about right. In their opening 6 fixtures, they have had some pretty tough games on paper. You know, they've already played the likes of Sheffield United, Blackburn, who have started the season really well. They've played Coventry, who a lot of people fancied at the start of the season as well. The result on the opening game week and performance against Oxford really concerned me, but it's felt like they've been gradually growing into this season. I think that was probably expected under a new manager. Quite a bit of turnover within that squad in the summer as well. I think Norwich, as long as they continue to improve, as they probably have been in recent weeks, then they're probably about right for where I thought they'd be at this stage of the season, if that makes sense. Plymouth Argyle, do you know what? I'd probably say they've been about right so far. Really up and down in terms of performance levels. Obviously, that opening day performance and result against Sheffield Wednesday got everyone talking, got a lot of people on the back of Wayne Rooney. But recent performances, I think there's been a lot more room for optimism at Plymouth. The result against Sunderland was an absolutely massive one. All right, they lost over the weekend against West Brom, but that was always going to be a very tricky match. They're above the relegation zone right now, albeit only just, but I think every Plymouth fan would take that at the end of the campaign. Oh, where do I stand on Portsmouth right now? They're a really tricky one to put your finger on. I did have them to survive quite comfortably in my predictions at the start of the season, and from that aspect, you'd probably say they've been below expectations right now, but taking the context into consideration, the teams they've faced so far, how difficult those matches were always going to be, I'd be tempted to put them in about right, you know. The real test for Portsmouth will be in the upcoming months when they play the sides who I expect to finish in and around them, and whether they can consistently pick up points in those sorts of matches. We've not really been able to see evidence of that so far because they've been playing so many of the top sides. So right now you'd probably say slightly below expectations, but I wouldn't be surprised if I'm jumping them up in the weeks to come when the fixture list does start to ease up a little bit. Preston so far this season, I'd have us in below expectations. It's been an absolutely chaotic start to the campaign with Ryan Lowe walking out after just one game of this season. I do think we've started to get things back on track with Paul Heckingbottom. I think he's made us a lot more solid, defensively resolute. That was certainly apparent in those performances against Blackburn Rovers and Middlesbrough especially, where I think we defended really well. The Luton game you can also throw into that. Scoring goals on a regular basis, I still think is an issue. We've been the second lowest scoring side in the Championship so far. That needs to be addressed before I can start moving us up the categories and before we start moving up the Championship as well. But starting to head in the right direction under Heckingbottom, albeit as a season as a whole, I think we have been below expectations. QPR so far, I'd probably say they've been about right. I thought they'd be a really solid outfit, hard to beat under Cifuentes, and I think that's proven to be the case. They have been quite draw heavy, 4 draws from their opening 6 matches, but only 1 loss, and they have had some pretty tough matches to navigate in their opening 6 games as well. Still early days, but based on my expectations of QPR before a ball had been kicked, I'd say it's been about right. Sheffield United, I'd have in above expectations, you know. I was a little bit fearful that the Blades may get off to a bit of a sluggish and slow start to the season. They obviously had the 2-point deduction to deal with, a lot of new faces coming into that side, a bit of a question over Chris Wilder as well, and whether or not he still has the magic to work in the Championship, but they immediately wiped out that 2-point deduction. Performances have been pretty consistent so far this season. Defensively, I think they've been a tough nut to crack, generally speaking. And like I say, especially with all the new faces that have come into that side, I think they've been above expectations. I fancy them to be in the top 6 come the end of the season, which they are right now, but I didn't expect them to start as fast as they have done. Sheffield Wednesday, I'd have to have him below expectations, maybe even way below expectations. I was really fancying Wednesday to properly kick on this season, obviously. They did a lot of business over the summer. The opening day performance against Plymouth probably set expectation levels to a bit of an unrealistic standard, but since that point, they have found points quite difficult to come by. They currently sit in the relegation zone after 6 matches, albeit we can't read much into the table right now, but the way that I thought Wednesday would kick on the up the table this season, it's not quite happened that way. Listen, it's still early days in this season, but they have been below my expectations so far. Stoke, a bit of a tricky one really. Do you know what? Under Steven Schumacher, I thought they were probably about right in terms of performances, points on the board and things like that, but obviously the Stoke City board would beg to differ and they'd have them in below expectations. It is a big gamble that the club have taken, especially considering they gave Schumacher the first 5 games of the season when they clearly weren't fully on board with his vision for the club before the campaign had started, which is all very strange. Listen, it is a good squad there, and the higher-ups at Stoke probably see that team right now, how many young talents they've got in that squad, and think they shouldn't be scrapping in a relegation fight or anything like that. They want to be kicking up the table, but things take time to build in the Championship. And where they finish now really is anyone's guess, to be honest. Sunderland, I'd have to have in way above expectations. I've been so impressed by them so far. Was expecting a big improvement from last season, but certainly not to the degree of the results they picked up so far this season. 5 wins from their first 6 matches. So many of their youngsters really coming to the forefront of that side right now as well. I think especially when you take into consideration they lost their best player over the summer in Jack Clark, and they've not really felt that absence so far. They've been way above expectations. Swansea City so far this season, I'd have them in above expectations, you know. Wasn't really sure where to stand on Swansea before a ball had been kicked, but they absolutely wiped the floor when Preston went to Swansea earlier in the season, beat us 3-0. They've only lost 2 of their first 6 matches, and those 2 losses came against really good sides. They lost against Middlesbrough away and West Brom away. Probably should have beaten Cardiff. on reflection of that game as well. I think they were probably disappointed they didn't kill that game off, but another good win for them away at Coventry over the weekend. I'd say they pleasantly surprised me so far with how fast they've actually started. Watford, it was a bit of a bump back down to reality maybe, that result over the weekend against Norwich, but still on the reflection of their start to the season, their first 6 matches, I'd still have them in above expectations for me. I really had Watford down as a side that would struggle this season, and listen, that absolutely could still be the case. We're still early days into this campaign, but they won their first 3 matches of the campaign, and that has given them a decent platform to kick on. Now, in terms of West Brom, I think I'd be foolish to put them in anything but way above expectations. I think a lot of us thought they'd be strong this season, but to have started the campaign as flawlessly as they have, I'm going to have to put them into that top category. Before a ball had been kicked, I did have them to finish 7th. I am regretting that decision now. I think they are looking like a shoo-in to finish in the top 6 this season. They've got one of the most stable back lines in the Championship, a really competitive midfielder, and now a forward in Josh Maja who looks like he's capable of competing for the Golden Boot this season, coupled with one of, if not the best managers in the Championship. It's just a very good group and mentality that West Brom have going on at this moment, I think. Deservedly, I think they're going in the top tier. Oxford United, I'm going to have to put into way above expectations. Really been pleasantly surprised by just how fast they've been able to start this season. Despite signing a hell of a lot of players in the summer, having a big turnover of that squad, they've really hit the ground running. Alright, I know they've not picked up any points on the road so far this season, but they've won all 3 of their home matches, despite being the most tipped side to be relegated before a ball had been kicked. They've been, I think, the best performing of the 3 clubs that have come up so far this season. Listen, they could still be dragged into a relegation scrap. I think they probably will be. You know, they won't continue that amazing run at home, and they do need to start picking up points on the road eventually, but as starts to the seasons go, I don't think they could have got much better, really. Was really impressed with them when they played Preston a few weeks ago. One of the best things I can say about Oxford as well is they're so fun to watch. I always enjoy tuning into one of their games. So yeah, they're definitely heading in the right direction right now, way above my expectations. And then finishing it off with Leeds United, I'd probably say they've been about right so far based on these first 6 games. I did have Leeds to win the Championship before a ball had been kicked. They are still my favourites to go ahead and win the league this season. While they haven't quite been operating at title-winning pace so far this season, I do think they are capable of getting to that level. But in saying that, I think their next 4 or so matches will be quite decisive. They've got a pretty tough run coming up. If they come out of that on the right end, I think they're onto a winner. If not, could find themselves under a bit of pressure. Well guys, those are my general thoughts on every Championship club and what I've made of them so far this season. Do you agree with my thoughts? Do comment down below. Other than that though guys, that will now wrap it up for today's video. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you did go on to enjoy, make sure to leave a like. But apart from that, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.